Start, start. Start.
Now may I invite Neetaji to all.
Excuse me.
We'll start today's session by a
filmmaker, storyteller who works at the intersection of art, myth and activism. A very, very warm welcome to you, sir, from all of us at Flow. The crowd and the crew is jubilant with your presence here today. Shekharji's directorial debut, Masoom delivered the genius in him to the world. And who can help but not remember Mr. India? And Shekharji, I'm sure it must be nostalgic for you to come back to the city where you spent your formative years, the modern school and St. Stephen's. He's a modernite, girls. Equally at home in Hollywood and Bollywood, he has gained international recognition with the Bollywood film Bandit Queen, which won the National Film Award for the Best Feature Film in Hindi. His historical biopic, 2007 sequel, Elizabeth, The Golden Age, won the BAFTA Film Awards and was nominated for 2 Oscars. He was a member of the jury at the Cannes. He was a member of the jury at the Cannes Film Festival, and his forthcoming film Pani explores Mumbai's shrinking water supply. His achievements are innumerable, and we could spend the whole afternoon talking about them. But what we are here for is to hear Shekharji speak about himself. So we look forward to a fascinating and insightful session from the perspective of a filmmaker on powerful ways to unleash our inner creativity and potential that will allow us to innovate in terms of how we lead our lives. Here, I would also like to acknowledge talented and versatile governing body member Ruchika Gupta, past chairperson, Kolkata chapter. Ruchika successfully runs Salman, the largest circulated Hindi daily out of Eastern India. Her own brand ideation company, Sun Entertainment, was instrumental in getting Filmfare to the East for the first time in 65 years. And her term as chairperson of Kolkata took the entire Kolkata by storm. But before I conclude, I would also like to take a few seconds to mention and invite you to all the forthcoming and upcoming programs at Flow. Launch of the 12th chapter of Flow at Pune by Honorable Chief Minister of Maharashtra, Shri Devendra Fadnavis, on 27 January. Session with Mr. William Bissell of Fab India on thriving in an age of rapid and uncertain change on January 13. Flow Fellowship meet on 13 February with a very interesting drum jam session. I'm proud to have Ruchika as part of my team this year, and we've thoroughly enjoyed weaving this event together, and we look forward to an enthralling session. I would also like to thank the Flow Secretariat, Dr. Manju Kalra, and all the girls for their invaluable support. With this, a big round of applause for Mr. Shekhar Kapur. And for Ruchika Gupta. Over to you, Ruchika.
Thank you, Neetaji. Good afternoon, beautiful ladies. A very warm welcome to all of you present here today. And thank you, Neetaji, for so graciously allowing me to host today's event and sharing the dais with a man whom I have been in awe of since my Masoom days. I am deeply honored to add a memorable chapter to our lives today and request all of you present to bring forth your thoughts and make this session eventful, engaging, experiential, and create a whole new adventure. Shekhar ji, apart from being an actor, director, is more so an adventurer. And when we were discussing the topic for today's conversation, he said that he wants to talk about we are the stories we tell ourselves. So, ladies, I would go on to my first question for today's afternoon. And Shekhar ji asked you, "Kahani kise kehte hain?"
Okay, I have a mic. So well, thanks for having me here. Hopefully,
Storytellers.
yeah. And hopefully there's going to be a lot of interactive, and hopefully you will be asking me a lot of questions. Make the questions as challenging as possible. Oh, okay, so I'll just use the mic. So can you switch this off, please? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So I was saying that thanks for having me here. It's wonderful to be here, and I'm told, the power is shifting. In India, it used to be male power, it's all women's power now. And I think that I'm in a sea of power right now. So I am hoping that this will be an interactive session, because I can go on talking for the rest of my life, sitting here, and you'll say, "Yeah, aadmi bahut bolta hai," which is what we probably say about men all the time anyway. But I would like to answer your questions and then make your questions as challenging as possible, so that I go home with a lot of learning for myself, because otherwise if we don't learn from each other, we've wasted each other's time. Right? You said, your question was, what's the story? Yeah. Alright, so let me start. Would you like this to be surface or deeply philosophical? Okay, I'll come to the podium. Alright. You can't see it? I'm here. Is that good?
Yeah, that's much better.
Alright, so deeply philosophical or surface nice, like Shekhar, what's your start line? We've started from surface, we can go deep now.
Yeah.
Right, so let's start. What's the question?
I think we just forget the question and you can...
No, what was your question? That was an interesting question.
कहानी किसे कहते हैं?
Huh?
कहानी किसे कहते हैं?
Okay, almost everything, I think that everything that we do, everything that we say about ourselves, we get up in the morning and we tell ourselves a story, and a story is about ourselves. And then you follow that story till you get bored of that story and you change that story. We have deeper stories called mythologies that govern our lives, and culturally we change them. So, can I tell you a story?
Yes.
Sure.
So, imagine yourself with a parachute. Can you do that? Yeah, imagine floating down with a parachute. And the parachute is the fabric of yourself. That's a very strong fabric, right? And you're floating through life, hanging from this parachute, and life's okay. And sometimes there's a storm, so you have a few controls, right? Sometimes you have a few controls, and you can pull a lever here to compensate, you can pull a lever there to compensate. And then the storm goes away, but you're gradually floating and it's fine. The fabric of yourself is pretty strong. And somebody comes to you and says, "Why don't you look up?" And you say, "I don't need to look up. Why should I look up?" Okay. And you say, "No, just look up." And you look up and you realize there's no parachute. There never was. And so you panic. And you say, "Help!" You scream and you say, "I'm falling." And whoever's asking you the question says, but there's nothing to fall to. So you say, I'm falling down. Say, well, there's nothing down. And say, but I fell from somewhere. You say, well, actually, there was nowhere to fall from. And then you say, if I'm not falling, and I fell from nowhere, and I'm not falling to anywhere, who am I? And then that person says, now you're asking the right question. So what is a story? A story is fundamentally a desperate need to answer that one question, who am I? And most stories were told because we imagine our finite selves and we look up at the sky at night and you realize that space goes on forever and you're trying to comprehend your relationship of your finite imagination to your infinite ability of what you see is infinite or what you sense is infinite. So what do? You create a place where some really nasty God chucked you down, and as you were falling, you created gods that were trying to tear the fabric of your parachute. You created mythic gods and goddesses that were trying to save you, and then at the end you created mythic gods and goddesses that are trying to hold you as you fall. All an attempt to create a story, and that's how our mythologies were born. They were born because we desperately needed to find a way to comprehend the infinite. And we found that we could not comprehend the infinite without telling a story. So we told stories, and all our mythologies, all over the world, all cultures were born like that. And then we keep telling stories. So every day we are a story. We are nothing but a story. Because if we are not stories, then we're not real. Because actually we are not real. That's the problem. Actually, we're all just part of a huge eternal ecosystem. And we are unable to comprehend that. If you look at science today and you say, so when did time start? Ever ask a scientist that question? And they'll tell you that time started with the Big Bang. And you say, what was there before the Big Bang? And they say, we don't know. And as you all know, if time was there before the Big Bang, it never started, it was there. And that which did not start can never end. And therefore there's no linearity. Am I getting too philosophical? Okay, there's no linearity. So how do you create a today and a tomorrow? How do you create what is this moment and the next moment? How do you create your next moment? What is your next moment? If time is not linear, then it doesn't exist as a linear time. No clock is ticking. How do you create the next moment? You tell a story. You're constantly telling yourself stories. Bigger stories of your life, the story of your next moment. मुझे अभी जाना है कहीं, देखो टाइम हो रहा है. It's a story. Because it just proved to you that time to है नहीं. Existing is you created a story. So we exist constantly in larger forms of our lives. And I often tell people say to me, I'm depressed. And I look in their eyes and say, change the story of your life. Change the story. How do I change my story? They say, get up in the morning and what is the story? Arey, aaj itni problem hai. I say, change that story. Change it. Because it's only a story. And there's enough scientific proof that says that actually your neurons get used to your story.